Hello ladies and gents, in this video we will talk about the device API in UI5 and then we will see how we can export our table data into a spreadsheet. The device API provides information about the browser, device and operating system and more. For example, if we check the system namespace here, we can see if our app is running on a desktop, phone, tablet or a combination. And if we check resize, for example, we get some events fired when the application window is resized, or we can even have information about the orientation and orientation change events and some information about which browser is our app running on. Now using these information we can make some styling changes. So let's go to our app, and right now we have this predefined padding class for our icon tab bar. If we check here, we have this responsive content padding, and it is this green space here, which looks good on desktop. But if we convert our view to a phone, for example, it seems rather unnecessary because our screen is already small and we need almost every bit of space. So what we can do is we can take advantage of this device API and style our icon tab bar dynamically, so on phones we don't have this extra padding. Let's go back to our app, and to be able to use this device API, first we need to set it as a model on our application. But luckily, since we used the app generator, we already have it. If you go to component.js, you can see on init function, the device model is already set with the name device. And if you check the models file, here you can see that this device namespace is just imported from SAP UI device and then just set as a model. Now let's go ahead and use this. For our icon tab bar here, we will style it dynamically. So let's convert this to an expression binding. So curly braces and an equal sign. And here first we say if device slash system slash phone is truthy. We can check it here in the API. Under system we have this phone flag, which is a boolean, and if this is truthy, we don't want any style classes, else we want this responsive content padding. Now let's save and check our app again. And if we check the styling now, we can see there is no extra padding for the content of our icon tab bar. Let's also, for example, make this part here, this tab filter text, a little smaller. And we will do something very similar as for our text here. Again, we will check if our device is a phone. Actually, we will do the other way around this time. First, let's convert this to an expression binding. We need a $sign here. And here we say if our device is not a phone. So let me copy this here and add an exclamation mark. Then we want this text, or else we want another one from the i18n, which we will create, which should be a shorter one. So let's just say all, and let's create it in the i18n file. And let's check again after we restart the dev server. Let's start from here. We have the padding, we have 77 products, and let's make this smaller now. And we need to refresh since we are still in the browser. And now we just see all here, and we have enough space for all our icon tab filters as well. Now let's go back to the desktop mode and see how we can export our products data to a spreadsheet. For that, let's go back to our app, and first let's add a button to our footer. First, for our semantic page, let's set show footer to true. which is false by default. And then we don't just add a footer like we did with the page control. Since this is a semantic page, we need to use the corresponding aggregations. And if we check the semantic page, for example, from the samples page, we can see we have some action buttons here in the footer. But if we check the source code, we can see that we have a positive action aggregation, which is this one, a negative one, a message indicator here on the left. And since export doesn't fall into any of these categories, we have to use a custom action. So let me just copy this part here. And here, maybe before the email action, let's add our custom action. I will just set an icon instead of a text. SAP-icon, and we will use the icon XL-attachment. And then we need a press handler, of course, which we will name on export. Now let's go ahead and implement this in our controller. It's an event handler, so let's do it here. Function, no arguments. We say exports products data to a spreadsheet, and it's public. Now let's begin with a few variables. First we need our table, and it's this dot get view dot by ID, and the ID was just table. Then we need a column configuration. So we say a columns equal, we will actually create its own method, and we will name it underscore get column config, which will be an internal method, and we will create in a second. And lastly, we need some settings for our spreadsheet export. Let's create a variable named oSettings, which will be an object. And we need a workbook attribute here, which will also be an object. And first we need the columns, which will come from here, a columns. And next we need a data source for our export, which will be the items binding of our table. So we say table.getBinding items. And lastly, we can specify a file name. So let's say file name products.xlsx. And now we go ahead and create a sheet, var or sheet equals new spreadsheet, which we need to import. So let's go ahead and do that quickly. Here at the bottom we will import it from SAP UI export library. And here for the constructor we just pass in our settings object, and what we do is we call .build on our spreadsheet, and then we say .finally. Once we are done with it, we will just destroy it. So here we say sheet.destroy, another comma here. And now let's create our columns config method here as an internal method. Let's do it here at the top so it's closer. Function, again no input needed, so no arguments. And here maybe we can say convince method to create export column config, and it's a private one. And before we implement this, let's import one more thing. We will need the EDM type enum from the export library. So let's also import SAP UI export library and name this export library. And just like we did with the value state, here let's create a variable named EDM type, and it will come from this export library with this EDM type name again. And now let's go ahead and implement our private method. Here we just need to provide an array of configs. So let's create our array var a columns initialized as an empty array, and let's start with product ID columns.push. We pass in an object. First we need a label, and then we can get it from i18n file via this dot get resource bundle. And normally this method is available for the component, but if we check the base controller, we should have a method with this exact name, and then it returns our resource bundle. That's why we can use it like this. And then we simply say get text, and we need a product ID text. Let's create it quickly. ID should be an equal, and then we need the name of the property that the value will come from, and we can check it from the metadata of our data, but I already know it's named product ID, so I will just type it in. And lastly, we need a type, which is a number. Let's actually go ahead and double check if that's the case. We go to network. I already have it filtered for the metadata, and if we check the products entity right here, here is our key product ID, and it's, let's see, and it's EDM type integer 32, so it is a number. And we can say this EDM type dot number with a capital N, and this is our ID. Next, let's add one for the product name. Let's see what is our name. Here it's this one, auto-generated. Let's add a space here while we're at it. So this is our text and our property. Let's see, we have it here already. It's named product name, and this time it's type of string. Next, that's another one for the category. We should have a text here, and this time it will come from the nav property here. Let's copy it. It's also string. Next, let's do the supplier. And it again comes from the supplier navigation property, also a string. Next, I believe we have the status. And it comes from discontinued field. Now we have a simple formatting here that we implemented. If it's discontinued, we say discontinued, else we say in production. So we convert this boolean to a string basically, and we can also do that here. First, this is EDM type boolean that we have to specify, and then we have two additional attributes for the boolean values. First one being true value, and this will be put in as the value for true, and we can again reach out to our i18n file and here for true we use discontinued. And the next one, as you can guess, is called false value, in which case we can say in production. And what else? We need the units in stock. Let's copy the first one, since this one is also a number. And units in stock, let's get the text key. Property is units in stock. And let's also add one more thing here. If we check the metadata again, we see this units in stock, and we can also see a field named quantity per unit, which is of type string, and it means if our unit is a box of an item, for example of a product, then we can see how many per unit. So let's add that as well, quantity per unit. And for this we need to convert this property to an array. And we will display this with a string template. So let's convert this to a string. And for our template, we say template here. And then we will use curly braces again. First we will display the first value, first property, which is units in stock. And then let's add a space and a dash. And then between parentheses, let's display quantity per unit, which is the argument with index 1. Now we have our config as well. Let's go ahead and try after we restart the dev server. Let's use this one. We have our export button, and when we click, we have an error. Oh shit, that destroy is not a function because it's one of my trademark typos. Here, this is destroy. And now we try again. Another one, export utils column is not provided. It should be. Let's check if our private method is being called. Here, let's see. Columns, columns coming from here. Let's add a breakpoint. Oh, I forgot to return this config. Here we have to say return a columns. And now if we export, we can see the progress. And once we are done, let's try to open it. Looks good enough, except for the status, but that might be just the width exactly. So we have discontinued and in production. The rest also looks fine. And here we have our units in stock with some extra information. That would be all for this video. Thank you all for watching, and see you in the next one.